All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Amy Campanella, Development Director for Textiles EPR at Reconomy, and I'm here with Jamie Beck, VP of Sustainability and Compliance at Fabacus. We'll be exploring two major regulatory developments transforming how businesses manage product and packaging responsibility. Extended producer responsibility, also known as EPR, and digital product passport, known as DPP. These are significant changes already influencing how brands and retailers operate across global markets in the EU, UK, USA, and beyond. They come with very real obligations, from registering and reporting to rethinking product and packaging design from a sustainability perspective. But while the regulatory landscape is complex and still evolving, it's also full of opportunity, especially for businesses ready to get ahead of the curve and lead on transparency and circularity. I'm going to walk through what EPR is, who it applies to, and how it connects with DPP in the EU's broader Ecodesign regulation. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jamie, who will dive deeper into how DPPs support compliance and unlock long-term value. Just a quick note before we begin, today's session is being recorded, and we're going to share the recording with all of you after the webinar. And we're also going to have plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time or save them for the end. To kick things off, we'll look at the basics. What exactly is EPR and why does it matter now? So many of you will already be familiar with EPR legislation, but for those newer to the topic, this will provide essential context. Grasping this foundation is critical because EPR has evolved far beyond a niche regulatory issue. It's become a key driver of product design, supply chain strategy, and compliance requirements globally. So, what exactly is EPR? It's a policy framework that assigns producers full responsibility for their product's life cycle. And this is with a particular focus on the post-consumer stages. Producers are expected to actively manage how products are collected, repaired, reused, recycled, or disposed of. The primary goal is to internalize the environmental costs associated with products, incentivizing more sustainable design and reducing the financial burden on public waste management systems. And with regards to who counts as a producer under EPR, this typically includes manufacturers, brand owners, importers, and retailers, anyone introducing products into the market. Determining who the obligated party is depends on how products reach consumers. If you sell directly to consumers, B2C, you're usually the obligated producer. If your sales are purely business to business, B2B, such as supplying retailers, then the responsibility typically falls to those retailers. That said, even within B2B supply chains, suppliers remain essential partners as compliance increasingly demands transparent data sharing on product composition and packaging to support downstream actors' regulatory obligations. Given the fast evolving regulatory landscape, it's vital to clearly understand your role and data responsibilities within EPR systems, regardless of where you sit in the value chain. So EPR, it covers a wide spectrum of product categories. And for brands and retailers, this includes everything from textiles and toys to electronics and furniture and more. However, the EPR category that nearly every business interacts with, regardless of sector, is packaging. Whatever product you bring to the market, it's packaged in some form. Cardboard boxes, plastic wrap, swing tags, labels, inserts, the list goes on. Packaging EPR requires you not only to report the types and quantities of these materials, but also to understand their environmental impact. And increasingly, many jurisdictions are implementing what's known as eco-modulation. This is a system where fees are adjusted based on the sustainability of your packaging. If you design packaging with recycled or recyclable materials, you may reduce your EPR fees. Conversely, packaging that's difficult or costly to recycle, this may attract higher fees. This means EPR isn't simply a compliance checkbox or reporting exercise, it's actively incentivizing brands to rethink their packaging strategies. The goal is to minimize packaging waste, drive more sustainable design choices, and support a broader circular economy ambitions. So, for brands, this creates both a challenge and an opportunity. By optimizing packaging sustainability, you reduce regulatory costs, enhance brand reputation, and align with increasing consumer and stakeholder expectations around environmental responsibility. EPR originated in Sweden in 1990 when government advisor Thomas Lindqvist proposed that producers should be responsible for their products through the entire life cycle, including post consumer waste. The goal: drive better product design and reduce environmental impact at end of life. The first large scale implementation came from Germany in 1991 with the introduction of EPR for packaging and the now iconic green dot system, no doubt familiar to many of you today. Since then, EPR has expanded across Europe, becoming embedded in key EU directives covering packaging, WEEE for electronics, batteries, and then more recently, textiles. In textiles specifically, France pioneered EPR back in 2007, with countries like Italy and Spain recently following. Italy published a draft decree in May, and Spain announced its framework in late June. For brands, the key point is this: EPR is no longer just about packaging or a distant regulatory issue. It's a fast growing, cross category compliance reality, increasingly tied to broader regulations like the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, or ESPR. This demands greater transparency, data sharing, and accountability from producers worldwide. EPR, it's evolved from a waste management tool to a strategic approach to product stewardship and global market readiness. To summarize the landscape, in the EU, EPR is well established for packaging, WEEE, and batteries. Textile EPR is active in France, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Latvia. Italy and Spain are moving quickly and are due to launch their program well before the EU mandate takes effect in mid 2028. And we anticipate many other member states will follow Italy and Spain's lead and get ahead of the EU timeline. Then the UK has has EPR for packaging, WEEE, and batteries, with textiles very much on the horizon. In the US, EPR is state driven. 4 states have packaging, 25 states have WEEE, 7 states have battery EPR, and then California aims to be the first state to include textiles from 2027. And then Canada plans full provincial coverage for packaging EPR by 2026, with WEEE and battery systems already in place. But beyond these, countries such as Japan, South Korea, Brazil, India, South Africa, and Chile, they're all developing EPR programs. So if you're operating globally, EPR is either already impacting your products or it will very soon. Spain is the latest country to release a draft decree on textiles EPR, following Italy's draft in May. The Spanish draft was published at the end of June and marks another important step in the rollout of EPR legislation for textiles across Europe. This signals real momentum as more EU member states begin to formalize how textile circularity will be regulated, with increasing clarity on legal obligations, producer definitions, and compliance pathways. Spain's draft outlines which products and producers fall in scope. It introduces mandatory reporting and data requirements and sets the framework for producer responsibility organizations, also known as PROs or PROs. and the pros coordinate the collection and treatment activities. Importantly, the obligations will apply to all producers placing textiles on the Spanish market. And this is going to include importers, retailers, and online sellers as well. The decree, it aligns closely with Spain's existing EPR approach for packaging, reflecting a broader national strategy to unify waste and circularity systems. At Reconomy, we are already supporting clients with tailored legal and operational briefings, policy engagement for the consultation process, and guidance on integrating Spain's requirements into a wider European EPR roadmap. The public consultation, it's open until the 4th of September. So now is your moment to assess your risk and exposure, engage in the consultation process, and future-proof your data and compliance system across the Spanish market. Now that we've covered what EPR is and where it's being implemented, let's unpack what it means in practical terms for you as an obligated producer. First, you'll need to register in every country where your products are sold. Next, you must report on detailed volumes and materials, not just for your products, but also for all associated packaging. You'll also be required to pay EPR fees, which fund waste management and recycling programs. To meet these obligations, you'll need to collect and manage comprehensive data. This is going to include product specifications, material compositions, weights, and sales figures broken down by country. In many markets, you'll be expected to join a producer responsibility organization, which acts as a collective body managing EPR compliance on your behalf. And you want to be prepared to budget for varying fee structures, as fees differ significantly from one jurisdiction to another. Importantly, there's a growing incentive to explore eco-design strategies, since more sustainable products and packaging may reduce your fees. Even if your sales are primarily B2B, you'll still be expected to share accurate product and packaging data with your retail partners who are likely to hold the compliance obligations. And this is where things can get overwhelming fast, especially for global brands juggling multiple markets. And the biggest challenge being no two countries operate the same way. So now that we've looked at what's required for producers under EPR, let's zoom in on the textile sector specifically and how varied the rules can be from one country to the next. This slide, it's comparing textile EPR frameworks in Italy, France, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Latvia. Each has taken a slightly different approach to implementation. Now, with Spain's legislation announced at the end of June, we'll soon be adding another layer of variation to this already fragmented landscape. This diversity across member states really reinforces the point for the previous slide. Managing EPR compliance across multiple markets is increasingly complex, with each country having its own rules, timelines, and data requirements. And that's why there's growing pressure and a real need for greater harmonization at EU level. The EU-wide mandate for textiles EPR comes in at 2028, and it's aiming to create more consistency. But for now, the regulatory picture, it remains patchy and challenging to navigate. So next up is ESPR, the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation. Where EPR focuses on the end of a product's life, ESPR takes us right back to the beginning, product design. ESPR is the EU's flagship framework to make products more durable, repairable, recyclable, and sustainable throughout their entire life cycle. It officially came into force in July 2024 and will gradually roll out product-specific rules over the coming years. So in this framework, what it includes is the digital product passport, which is a digital ID via QR code or tag containing key information on materials, origin, repair, recycling, and environmental performance. There's the ban on destruction of unsold goods, which from mid-2026, large companies can no longer destroy unsold textiles or footwear in the EU. And it's important to know that as of the 30th of June, the European Commission opened a 6-week feedback period on proposed rules restricting the destruction of unsold consumer goods. So this is your chance to suggest specific exemptions. All feedback that's going to be submitted during this period is going to help shape the final version of the legislation. Also in ESPR, The Ecodesign requirements have been extended beyond energy to include durability, repairability, recycled content, carbon footprint, and circularity. And then last but not least, there's the green public procurement. With over 1.8 trillion euros in annual spend, public authorities will soon be required to buy products that meet strict sustainability criteria. So, how does EPR and ESPR connect? In simple terms, EPR is about responsibility. It puts legal accountability on producers to manage a product's end of life through take back, reuse, recycling, and disposal. And then ESPR is about visibility. It provides the tools and requirements to build sustainability into product design from the start and to make key product data transparent and accessible. So EPR and the digital product passport really start to converge within ESPR. And this is really where the opportunity lies for you, brands and retailers. The data required for EPR compliance, like product composition, material weights, and packaging, is largely the same foundation needed to populate a digital product passport. So, if you're already collecting this data for packaging or textile EPR, you're not starting from scratch. You're on your way to being DPP ready. So let's bring this to life with a real world example of how EPR data directly powers digital product passport. In the UK, there's a national tool called the Recycling Assessment Methodology, or RAM, another acronym for everyone today. RAM assesses how recyclable your packaging is, not just in theory, but within the practical context of the UK's waste infrastructure. Each packaging component receives a RAM score that directly influences your EPR fees. But that same score can also be integrated into your digital product passport, providing regulators and consumers with a clear visual signal of circularity. This is displayed using a traffic light system. Green is fully recyclable, leading to lower EPR fees and stronger sustainability messaging. Amber is partially recyclable, indicating potential design improvements. And then red is not recyclable, potentially resulting in higher costs and reputational risks. For brands and retailers, this serves a dual purpose, supporting regulatory compliance and using product level sustainability data as a competitive differentiator. So, this example really highlights how integrating EPR and DPP strategies creates operational efficiencies and value. All feels overwhelming. You're not alone. And that's exactly why we offer an EPR impact assessment. It's a structured, practical way to cut through the complexity and get ahead. We help you understand your obligations by country and product, forecast fees to support budgeting, run readiness checks to identify gaps, and we provide a step by step checklist for you to get EPR ready with confidence. Now, I'm delighted to hand over to Jamie, who will take us further into the world of digital product passports and how the technology helps you streamline data, meet evolving requirements, and future proof your operations.
Thanks so much, Amy. Really interesting. Again, each time we speak and the presentations you give, I learn more and more, and it's evolving each day. For brands and retailers out there that are supplying multi-country product in places from sourcing to selling, it's a complete minefield. So yes, really useful. So we're just going to take a little bit more into the digital product passport aspect of the ESPR regulation. Now, a lot of you have probably known about this. It's a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a topic at the moment that you see on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So we're going to be trying really factual today and leave quite a bit of time at the end to ask any questions for clarity. There's ESPR as a regulation for the product and the digital product passport side is still very much in development. So any sort of providers, DPP providers out there that they can claim that are are confident that they can meet ESPR, they can't because it hasn't been set yet. So we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. So we're going to head straight into the ESPR timeline and the latest update. So there was a timeline even here in yesterday, so I shall feed that back because it came from a really credible source. But this is where we are at the moment. So as Amy mentioned, it was approved on the 18th of July in 2024. It's actually going to be adopted where we believe a draft will be coming out of ESPR requirements, including the DPP requirements, either at the end of this year or early next year. It's likely that that's going to come out initially in a draft format, and then it will be asked for feedback, comments, and then it's very likely that it will be published either between the mid to the end of 2026. And what happens then is it's the clock starts ticking for 18 months or when that actually comes into compliance. So the timescales here are pretty accurate. It's likely to be the enforcement time will be very much at the end of 2027 into 2028. But as we know, in terms of product development, lead times, etc., that's not an awful long time from where we sit here today. So that's the very latest, hot off the press as of something that I attended yesterday. So next, we're going to go into the types of data that we believe will be required. So you can see here, I've sort of summarized them, but just to run through a few of them. Product data. So there's going to be, it's likely requirements for basic identifiers. So that might be EAN numbers, styles, SKUs. It will very much include composition. It could well include licensing data for branded goods that use IP. Verification, certification will be key. So again, if there is any claims there of materials such as organic cotton, fair trade, GRS, etc., that will very much need to be included. It will definitely have end of life instructions, so how to look after the product, how to repair it, access to spare parts, how you might reuse the product, and what you might do to recycle it at its end of life. It's looking likely that there will be environmental impact data, which I'll come on to a bit later on and talk to you a little bit about PEF, but very much about the emissions, the carbon footprint, the water use, and the material impacts. That's looking even more likely now with some of the changes to CSRD, from where the scope of the size of companies that need to abide by it, but also the scope of it and the delay. It's likely that that will put more focus on ESPR to be able to include that product data and that carbon footprint in the digital product passport. Supply chain data, again, very key element of it, just to demonstrate to customers and to be transparent about where the product is made, where it's transported from, all the way down to in various different levels of the supply chain. So it isn't just about ticking boxes. It's the engine. The data element is the engine of trust and transparency for sort of future-proof compliance. Just going to move on now to talk about the challenge. So you've heard a little bit about the data. The challenge. So we've worked with many brands and retailers, high street brands and retailers, and been into a bit of the belly of the beast of looking at the data that we believe will be required. And the honest answer is there's not any one system that we found that actually houses all the required data that we need. So it's often scattered internally, externally. A lot of brands use traceability companies that would hold a lot of supply chain data. It might be, for example, things like tariff codes and things that are quite unique might be managed by a third party. And then you've got all the brand's internal systems. So that could be PLMs, PIMs. But really what we found is there's not one single repository that holds all the required data. So this is very much where Fabacus comes into its own. So we do this in the licensing industry. So what we tend to build, and you'll hear when you do hear us speak at conferences or on presentations, we very much talk about a compliant catalogue. And the reason we do that is that once you build a compliant catalogue, it's very much a single source of truth for data that's verified data. So we work hard with brands and retailers to do the required plumbing into many different systems, internally, externally, to bring it all together into a single robust repository of data. And then once you have that data in a good state, you can then publish a digital product passport. And as Amy was saying, if we bring in packaging data as part of the data requirements, we could then send that direct to Valpac and Reconomy. It would also help elements of CSDD, CSRD. But first of all, you have to build this compliant catalogue. And once you've got that, that's the hard work to build that. The digital product passports that you see probably on a daily basis that are being published, we refer to them internally as the roof. So the house, the structure is the data. The roof is the DPP, which is an output. It's a website. So again, it looks really good, but actually the core of it is the data that sits underneath. So I'm going to show you Nobody's Child passport, digital passport. As I mentioned earlier, just a quick disclaimer that the ESPR requirements are not yet final. So we've created the Nobody's Child passport based on speaking to a number of experts. We are part of Surpass 2 in many different working forums. I'm in the textile working group. We're also very much hot on the latest draft legislation, industry knowledge, and stakeholder engagement. And that's for everyone from factories, UK suppliers, brands, retailers. And the last point I want to make before I show you some screenshots of the passport is this is very much a best-in-class pilot, we believe, in our opinion. And what I mean by that is I don't want to scare anyone looking at this to think that this is going to be a basic requirement of a digital product passport. This is very much to show businesses what could be done. So for things like supply chain, we've gone down to tier 5, for example. So I just wanted to make that caveat before people look at the screenshots and say, wow, there's an awful lot of data points there. So this is the passport. So this is accessed by a unique QR code that's stitched into the products of Nobody's Child garment. Very simply, you can have images, video, the product description, features, and importantly, the product composition. Next is the journey. So this is where we call Trace My Steps. And we actually go down to, as I mentioned, tier 5. And what I mean by that is everywhere from the garment factory, the dye house, the fabric mill, the yarn mill, all the way down to raw material, which also includes the components, such as buttons, lips, and trims. So again, we believe the requirement is probably going to be tier 1, maybe tier 2. Again, that's not something that we can confirm, but it's very much we believe it will just be at that very top line for supply chain traceability. It's worth noting this is probably the first time ever that it will be a requirement to link a factory with a product. So you'll find that most brands and retailers publish their tier 1 and some down to tier 3 factory lists on public websites, on their own websites. But this will be the very first time that links an actual product to a specific supply chain. Next, you've got the product footprint, as I mentioned. So here you can see the product impact and percentages all the way from materials to end of use by the consumer. We include carbon and water. We've used different calculators, including the product HIG tools from Worldly, and the current latest version is using Fairly Made's platform. It's highly likely that the methodology for the calculation is going to be used of PEF. PEF is a methodology developed by the European Commission to measure the environmental performance of a product for its life cycle based on an LCA principles. It covers around 16 environmental impacts that include climate change, water use, land use, and resource depletion. ESPR promotes the use of PEF to define performance benchmarks and minimum requirements for products placed on the EU market. So it supports the harmonisation of environmental data and serves as a basis for setting eco-design criteria, especially for high-impact products. So what part of this means is that they want consumers to be able to compare and contrast. So whether that be on a website, on a brand's website, to be able to select products and compare their product impact data, or whether that customer is in a store and they can scan and see that they like two dresses that are very similar in price, and they want to be able to scan both to make an informed decision if one is better than the environment the other. And the only way they can do that is to set a standard so it can be compared from shop to shop and product to product. So that's very much likely going to be PEF, which will be the methodology. Next, durability. So while ESPR and DPP durability requirements are still being finalised, we proactively disclose in fabric tests, which we believe is going to be similar to what will be required. So we've used globally recognising textile testing methods for colour fastest to light, pilling, shrinkage, etc. That demonstrates the physical durability of the product and the fabric. This approach provides a sort of credible interim solution aligning with the spirit of the upcoming ESPR legislation and enabling early consumer transparency. There's been quite a lot of thought and effort gone into it because, again, consumers wouldn't necessarily know the ratings or scoring of fabric tests and whether they were good or bad. So we've tried to use, as you can see, an accelerometer at the top and bars with different colours to show that whether the results are seen as good. All the results are based on the accredited lab testing, ensuring reliability, and they can be compared product to product. And we will adapt and expand this data once it's formalised and once the durability metrics and thresholds are confirmed under ESPR and any other relevant acts. Next, you've got certifications, which I mentioned are key. It's very likely that there will be a public and a private view of the digital product passport. And what I mean by that is customs, borders, local authorities will be able to access more detail that's not open to the public. And what that one of those, an example might be, is actually the certificates. So if a product is made from organic cotton and you've got a GOT certificate, it might be that they can access that through a private view of the DPP. Again, it makes their life a lot easier. Next, I think you've seen this screen from what Amy showed earlier, but very much in simplistic forms, we can either take data directly from Fabacus and Reconomy and actually show it on the digital product passport, which are again for full visibility and transparency for customers. Or again, we can ingest the information from the brand, retailer, supplier, and then send that directly to Fabacus and Reconomy to do their work and calculations on it. Care instructions. So this section you can see we include all the product care instructions, which can be product specific. So, for example, we might give advice on denim for nobody's child that says that you don't need to wash denim each time. And then you can also give information on how to wash the garments responsibly using low temperatures and anything in between. Next, we've got repair and reuse. So this is what we call like the circular services. So again, nobody's child has a link up with Sojo, who can carry out repairs and alterations on products. So again, through the DPP, they can link directly with a repair and alteration service. They can access garment take-back services, and they can also access things like rental or pre-loved items. And then lastly, I think a quote that I've heard before around ESPR, and I can't remember who said it, was see it as opportunities, not handcuffs. As in, this will be probably a very unique opportunity to engage directly with your customers to tell your story, to tell them about the business, about how you source product, about how you can consciously choose the materials you use. So this is an element which internally we call reach, and it unlocks commercial opportunities. So it allows the platform to engage directly with consumers, enabling activities such as upselling, promoting upcoming campaigns, marketing initiatives, gathering valuable product or service feedback. So it's a dynamic space that not only enriches your CRM database with actionable insights, but also fosters customer loyalty while driving business growth through personalized and impactful interactions. So again, because of the QR codes we use are unique, again, we can produce heat maps of where the product is being scanned. So for example, if Nobody's Child was opening a new store, and remembering that Nobody's Child sells product through third parties with wholesale partners, they can actually see where the digital product passport is being scanned and then invite those customers to a new store opening, for example, with a personalized discount. Here's just an example where you can see where the customers would enter their details, and then they will receive an email with an example of a 20% off. So yeah, so that comes to the end of it. I'm just going to pop up for a few minutes, but again, this will be sent out as Amy mentioned. But this will take you directly to the passport that you've just seen to have a look at. And yeah, thanks for listening. Amy, I'll hand back to you while I stop sharing.
Thanks, Jamie. It was great to have a deeper dive into digital product passport legislation that's within ESPR and also to see what your digital product passport looks like. And in addition to it being super exciting how EPR data can integrate with the digital product passport, I think it's also exciting to see the circularity services and how that also links with EPR as well. So, in addition to that, consumer engagement to promote repair, reuse, and recycling, it's helping brands to manage the visibility of the flow of those products post consumer as well, so they can keep following that journey.
Very much so, and from an EU, very much looking into the future. Not only will the EU be able to have data on what happens to the products that enter the EU market, the brands and retailers will as well. So they'll be able to see, how many of their products actually get repaired or resold and recycled, and what happens at the end of the life. So it's very much going to produce some really great data that can be used and fed back into the system to just keep on increasing the circularity of products. So it's all very positive, even though I understand for businesses it can seem a little bit of a challenge, and there's a lot to undertake, just like there is on all sort of legislation.
And I'm pleased to say that we've got quite a few questions from the audience. So let's get started with our first question here from Charlotte. Charlotte has asked, are DPPs only for premium luxury brands, or are you seeing interest in fast fashion too? So Jamie, I think that's
Uh,
definitely one for you.
yeah. Thanks, Charlotte. Very much interest across the spectrum, really, from some yes, what I would call budget retailers, supermarkets, all the way through to higher end brands. So this is probably one of the only European requirements that affects all businesses. So a lot of the time, you'll find that businesses that are in scope are due to the turnover or how many employees they have. This affects some of the biggest retailers in the world that supply uh, into the EU market, but also will affect someone in Paris, a small dress shop that sells 6 dresses a week. So it very much covers everyone and yeah, all business types. It's probably worth saying, if we mentioned it earlier, but it's also going to be on every single product. So the requirement is set out is it's going to be for everything apart from food, feed, and medicine. So if you were to look around just wherever you are now and look around the room, you'll find that pretty much any physical object in there is going to require a digital product passport to allow full traceability. So hopefully that answers that one. It's very much small, medium, large, luxury, budget, all businesses.
Wow, so DPP really is going to be everywhere.
And probably just to add to that, Amy, sorry, is that whilst this is an EU requirement, some people might be aware that the United Nations are also developing a digital product passport. I think China is also looking at something different. Canada is also looking at something as well. So there's a lot, and they're all happily working together to make sure that things will be interoperable. And one digital product passport that a brand produces should be able to work globally.
That's really great to hear about that level of harmonization, that collaboration globally. That's what we need. That's what we need for DPP, for EPR, for so much environmental legislation that brands and retailers are accountable for. We've got another question. We've got a pre-submitted question where an attendee would like to understand timelines and the required minimal information. Can inbuilt platforms be used instead of third party?
The minimum requirements. Sorry, is this EPR, Amy, or ESPR, or both?
Both. If maybe you want to kick us off with the ESPR, then I can cover EPR.
Great. So ESPR, the minimum requirements aren't yet out or set. They're likely to come out in either probably December this year or early January, where we get our first view of what the draft requirements look like. Does it have to be a third party? No, it can be done in-house. What I would say is there's likely to be a fair amount of investment in terms of the EU registry. So this is where DPP providers will be registering the goods going onto the market. So the actual DPP and all its data in the EU registry. And again, the finer details about how that's going to work. But I should imagine there'll be quite a fair amount of investment for a brand retailer to do that on their own. But some may well, some that are well structured may well do that. So that's for ESPR. Amy, on to EPR, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So with EPR, it's pretty well established around the globe for packaging, WEEE, and batteries. If we focus on textiles, which is the one that is the most fast evolving, it's already established in France, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Latvia. Italy and Spain are hot off the press with their draft legislation. Italy published it in May, Spain did at the end of June, and we anticipate that both those countries will start their own legislation well ahead of the EU-wide mandate, which requires all member states to have implemented and operational textile EPR systems by May 2028. And when it comes to building your own system for managing EPR or utilizing a third party, it's very much going to depend on what the in-country legislation requires. Some countries will require brands and retailers to register with a producer responsibility organization to manage the data. Some will allow producers to create their own. So it really depends country by country. France, for example, which has been around since 2007, they have a single state-run system called Refashion, and all brands and producers must manage their data through them. But again, it can vary. All right, we've got another pre-submitted question, which is interested to find out more and to better understand how we as a charity, campaigner, retailer, and recycler fit into the new EPR legislation. What will it mean for us, and how do we have a voice? How do we have a voice in development of this? I'm happy to start that question off because I think that this one definitely has a connection with EPR. So your role as a charity, campaigner, retailer, and recycler fits into EPR very much at the post-consumer stage, because brands and retailers, obligated producers, are going to be obligated to manage that flow. And that existing infrastructure that we have through those sectors, through charity and recyclers, that existing infrastructure is what we need to utilize, and also where the funds from EPR fee can be invested to help improve it and scale it so that we can deal with the volume of textiles that aren't being managed through that flow and unfortunately might still be going through to disposal. And how to have a voice, the best way to do this is through organizations and associations. So, for example, if you're in Europe, if you're in the EU, that might be EURIC. In the UK, the Textile Recycling Association. Both of those organizations are representing the charities and recyclers, those that are part of the flow when it comes to post-consumer textiles. And then for brands and retailers, I recommend getting involved with organizations like UKFT in the UK, the UK Fashion and Textile Association. There's also the Eurotex in the EU, where you can not only stay up to date with the legislative developments, but also put forward how you would like to shape the legislation. I think at an EU level, though, because the Waste Framework Directive amendments are pretty well established and unlikely to be amended any further before becoming in the official journal, which we anticipate in October, working at a member state level is where you're going to have the most influence.
Excellent. Shall I take the next one, Amy?
Yeah, sure.
So again, this was a pre-submitted question. Just wanted to understand the link between GS1 QR code and digital product passport requirement. Yes, so GS1, as you might know, is looking at the end of 2027 to discontinue barcodes and replace them with a 2D code. The exact interactions are still being looked at and developed, but very much this, I think the key differences between the two is the GS1 will be more of a SKU, and by that I mean it will be scannable at the till and it won't be unique. However, it's very likely that the GS1 QR code on the packaging of the product, for example, will be able to access the digital product passport of the product. And it's likely, I would say, and again, just to confirm, it hasn't been approved, but it's likely, I would say, that the QR code for the digital product passport is likely to be unique to that product, which will differ to the GS1 code. Hopefully that answers that one.
Thanks, Jamie. Next up, we've got another question from Charlotte. Charlotte has asked, does EPR also include anything about returns packaging? Or is this out of scope because consumers could use any packaging, like a bin bag covered in lashings of sellotape to send unwanted goods back? Yeah, so the EPR across the board covers when products are placed on the market for the first time direct to consumers. So when it comes to returns, packaging, or resale of post-consumer textiles, those are currently out of scope.
Got it. And then we've got a question from Penny. How do you deal with products that do not have DPPs, e.g. second-hand clothing with tags cut out, which is quite normal? Great question. Again, it's something that's been looked at. Very similar, Penny, to if you have products that are going to be difficult that don't have care labels in, or products that are too small. For example, socks, for example, don't tend to have sewn in care labels. So it's very likely that that the EU will have a platform that you'll be able to search products again from certain brands to be able to find that. So a way of looking up. But B, it's highly likely that if you take socks, for example, that the QR code, the unique QR code might be on the packaging, and then you'd scan that QR code and add it to your digital wallet. And then at the end of life, or you needed that product repaired or looking for spares, you could go back into your digital wallet, find your digital inventory of what you've purchased, and access the required data and access the DPP from there. But again, this is all being debated at the moment and confirmed. And then I think there's a RAM rated one for you, Amy, next.
We got an EPR and a RAM, both from Ashima. Thank you, Ashima. If we start with the EPR, with EPR, is the brand considered a producer if they sell in the EU via an agent third-party sales company? So that really is going to depend on the contractual terms that you have with the agent or the third-party sales company. Often the agent or third party will take on the legal obligations for the brand. And one way to check this is to see how the packaging obligations are currently being managed by that agent or third party within the EU, because it's very likely that textiles will be mirrored. But we'd recommend having a conversation with the organization that you're working with to get any clarity on who will be considered the obligated producer. More often than not, it's whoever owns the sale. So if that brand or third party is the one that is legally selling direct to the consumer, then they are very likely the ones taking on those legal obligation. It's all about that sale, B to C. And the next question regarding who gives the RAM rating? Is the packaging manufacturer's responsibility, like Trimco, Labelon, Hallmarks, or the brands? So with the RAM rating, there's no single central authority assigning RAM ratings today. The responsibility lies with the producer, so the brand or the first importer, to determine and document the recyclability of the packaging. So RAM is a methodology, not a certification body. It provides the framework and criteria for assessing recyclability based on material composition, design features, local collection, sorting, and recycling capabilities, and compatibility with existing infrastructure. So ultimately, the brand or first distributor on the market is responsible for making sure that RAM assessments are carried out correctly and that the data submitted to compliance organizations or authorities is accurate.
The next one, does this just impact textiles? Will all packaging need DPPs, for example? I think very much for product specific packaging, for product packaging will need to be included as part of the passport. I think that's been clear in terms of what ESPR sets out to do with the general impact of the product and its packaging. For packaging itself, I don't think there will be a separate one if it's part of what the product arrives in. And I think the next one is regarding durability. In the DPP, how many washes is the standard that Fabacus uses? I'd love to be able to quote that, but I don't know is the honest answer. But I believe it will be a standard wash test that the likes of Intertek, SGS, Bureau Veritas, etc. I think there's a standard British European standard, but I believe it's just the standard wash test for fabrics. And then we've got another one saying about how's the DP advancement looking outside of textiles. So in terms of what's been announced so far is textiles, and it said that focusing on apparel, but again, clarity we will receive later on this year. So it's textiles first, then it's furniture will be next, then it moves on to tires, and then it will continue on with electronics, toys, hardware, and everything else. So hopefully that answers, but more information will come out as each one progresses. I'll keep going, Amy.
Yeah, please.
Does the EU plan to implement a unique DPP that allows for tracking of a specific article? Again, it's not confirmed, but we believe that will be the case because the EU does want to track what happens with products brought onto that market. And if you imagine if that was a SKU or style level, that's going to be pretty difficult to be able to track. So we believe our opinion and understanding is that there will be a unique QR code. A timetable beyond phase one for textiles, tires, etc. There's not at the moment. There's a document by the Joint Research Centre, and they're the ones that do a lot of the investigations into products and their impacts. They've released a number of documents. If you go on the Joint Research Centre's website, you'll be able to find documents in there where they've listed their priorities based on product types and impact to the planet. And that includes things like how much is recycled currently, how much is actually placed on the EU market, etc. So that I would say if you're looking to see where your products might feature, their list is a pretty good litmus test, I would say. Then we've got, is the idea DP Steeler has to cover each individual product rather than batch? Yeah, I think I've answered that one. We believe it will be unique. The next one, it even looks like we might finish bang on time, Amy. I've just spotted the clock in the bottom right of my computer. Does the Fabacus platform cater for all materials, textile, leather, paper, in terms of supply chain data gathering? And does the service include data collection and verification, or does this fall to the brand who then passes onto the platform? Really comprehensive question. Yes, our compliant catalogue caters for any material. And we can also split that down. So actually in the new Nobody's Child passport coming out later this year, you'll be able to trace the supply chains of the actual mix of where you have mixed materials. So let's say it was mixed with trying to think, organic cotton and linen, you'll be able to see both elements of the supply chain on the passport to be able to see it. So yes, we do that. And in terms of verification, yes, we can use external verifiers, whether that be from suppliers, third-party traceability companies, companies that hold transaction certificates, scope certificates for materials. Yes, that's all covered. We do that.
Thanks, Jamie. And I'll take the last two, if I may, from Hannah. Is data provided by brands and retailers public domain when they register for EPR? And can collectors, sorters, and recyclers join pros? The data is not public in the public domain when registering to a pro and submitting data as part of EPR. And we would highly encourage collectors, sorters, and recyclers to join PROs. They are essential stakeholders in helping to manage the flow of post-consumer textiles. And we would definitely recommend reaching out to pros in the EU and in the UK as they start to get established with the legislation evolving. And 10:59, that is all of the questions that have been submitted. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for your fantastic questions. We look forward to, we've got one more. Oh, there we go, Jamie, one more for you. We got one more minute.
Please can you clarify if Fabacus actually does the data collection from the supply chain or has to be done by brand? Yes, it's optional. We can go directly to suppliers to do that. All depends on what the data you hold and what you're likely to need. So yes, we can do that. And I think Penny's just come in and asked about the slides and recording. Yes, we will be sending out the recording.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.